Hey guys, in the last video we created the front end, the home page interface, the table where our tasks will go. In this video I want to set up our add form. Alright, so right now add HTML is just a plain blank page. So we're going to open that up. I'm going to open it with Sublime Text. And before what we want to do is copy everything from the index page over, because we'll be using most of the stuff here, the head area, the links to CSS files and all that. But before we do that, I just wanted to add a few things here. One, I want the jQuery link, the CDN at the bottom here. I'm going to bring that up, all right, because I want to put that in the head. You can leave the Bootstrap.js down there. Okay, so I'm going to put that right below the title, and then we want to include our custom JavaScript file, which we haven't created yet. So we can do that with script, and then we want the source attribute. That's going to go to js/main.js. Okay, and then you just want to close that script tag. Alright, and we need to create that file. So inside JS, create a new folder, a new file called main.js. Okay, and we'll open that up. But before we do any JavaScript, we need to create our form. So let's first of all grab everything on the index page and paste it into the add page. And what I'm going to do for the title, I'm just going to say add task. Alright, everything else here should be the same. The nav bar should be the same. Basically what we want to do is get rid of the table and the clear all tasks. And then for the page header, let's just change that to add task. Alright, and we'll save that. And now if we go back, reload, and click add entry, okay, we now have the same base layout. So what we need to do now is create the form. So if we go to the Bootstrap website and go to CSS, go down to where it says forms and click on that, and this just gives us a basic example. So what I'm going to do is just copy this and go back and paste it right under that header. Okay, let me just indent this a little. Okay, so now we need to clean this up. We have a form tag. Okay, and what we're going to do with the form tag is we're going to add an action. Okay, so action is the page that it's going to submit to, and where it's going to ultimately go. So we want it to go to index.html. Alright, we're going to give the form an ID so that we can use it when we're using jQuery. And the ID will be add task form. Alright, next we have the first field, which should be wrapped in a form group class. It has a label. I'm going to just get rid of this for attribute. And then the label will change from email address to task. Okay, the input type should be text. Class form control, leave that, and then we want to change the ID to task. For a placeholder, we can just say enter task. Alright, next is going to be our priority select list. So for the label, let's get rid of this for, and for the label we're going to say priority. Get rid of the input because this is going to be a select list, so we're going to say select, which should still have a class as the inputs do, which is form control. Alright, also an ID, which is going to be priority. Alright, and then we want to close that select, and then we want to put all the options in the middle. So option with a value. Okay, so for the first value, option will be low. Alright, the next option is going to be normal. And we're going to make that the default as well later. Okay, normal. This should be option value. Okay, and then the last one is going to be high. Okay, so that's the select list. Next we have the date. So for the label, get rid of this side, this for attribute, and get rid of that, and we're just going to put in date. Alright, and then the input, we're not going to have this file, it's going to have the type of date. Alright, the ID will also say date. And we need that form control class. Okay. Alright, we'll get rid of this paragraph right here. We don't need that. Okay, we don't need this checkbox, so from here to here. Okay, we do have one more field, which is the time. So I'm going to copy this div with the date, and paste that in, and then we'll change this to time. And the input type is going to be the new HTML5 time. Form controls good. ID, we're also going to change to time. Alright, and that's it. Now we need our submit button. Okay, so we have a button with the we need to put an ID. Actually, I don't think we need an ID, but the type should be submit. Okay, class is good. Alright, so that looks good. So that should be our form. Let's go ahead and save it and take a look at it. Okay, so that looks good. We can choose our calendar, your time. You can use the arrows or just type it. So what we need to do now is make it so that we can add a task to local storage. So we're going to be going to our main.js folder file, and we're going to use a lot of jQuery here. If you have experience in it, then that's great. If not, then this is going to be pretty basic. Basically, with jQuery, you want to use a $, and then whatever element you want to grab onto, you can put in here. Okay, whether it's an ID, a class, an element itself. All right. So if I just put a P in here, this is going to take every paragraph on the page, because a paragraph uses a P tag. All right, and then you could do stuff with it. We could say like dot hide. Okay, and that would make every paragraph on the page hide. All right, for something more specific, we can say we have an ID of, I don't know, top. Okay, and that will grab everything that's wrapped in an ID of top and hide it. All right, so that's pretty much how it works. Now, since we have our JavaScript file in the head, what we need to do is we need to say if the document has been loaded, then proceed to do your jQuery. Okay, so the way we do that is to actually use the document object itself. Okay, you can see we have the jQuery and we're selecting the document, and then we're going to call a method on that called ready. Alright, and then inside ready, we need to create a callback function, or an unnamed function, and in that is what we want to do. Okay, so let's say when the document's ready, we're going to alert I'm ready. Okay, so we'll save that and go ahead and reload, and now we get an alert that says I'm ready because the document's loaded. Alright, so everything we do with jQuery will be in here. Now we want to be able to add a task through that form, so the first thing we need to do is set up a handler. Alright, so I'm going to set up an event handler for the submit event. So I'm going to say when this form is submitted, then we're going to do something. Okay, so to do that, we can grab the form itself, which had an ID of add task form. Okay, and then we're going to say dot on. Okay, on is a jQuery method. We're going to say dot on submit, which is the event, and then the next parameter will be a self-calling function, and then inside that is where we'll put what we want to happen when the form is submitted. Alright, so let's just do a little test here and say alert form submit. Okay, so go ahead and reload, submit, and we get that alert. And then it goes to the index HTML because that's the default behavior, because if you look at our form, it has an action of index HTML. So if you change this, then you change the page that it'll go to after whatever needs to be done is done. Now, rather than sticking all the functionality that I want, or all the code, into here, what I'm going to do is set it up so that when the form's submitted, it calls a function. And it's going to call a function called add task. Alright, now we can create that function. So let's just label it here. We'll say function to add a task. And then we'll say function add task, no parameters. Now I should mention the way that local storage works. By default, local storage only stores strings, okay, key value pairs. But what we need to do is make it so that we can store an array of objects. Alright, so each task will be a single object. Alright, so we have to kind of tweak it a little bit. What we need to do is use a function called JSON parse, which will allow us to take those strings and create objects, an array of objects. And then we'll have another function called JSON stringify, which will change the object back to a string so that we can enter it. Alright, it'd probably be easier for me just to show you. Now, we're going to have a few fields per task. We know that we're going to have a task, or a task name, the priority, the date, and time. But what we also need is a unique ID. Alright, so that we can target tasks individually. And the easiest way that I can think of to create a unique ID is to use the date, the exact date, timestamp, even the seconds, so that they'll all be unique. Alright, so let's first do that. Alright, we'll say add a unique ID, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called new date, and I'm going to set that equal to a new date object, okay, which is standard JavaScript functionality. Then what I'm going to do is create an ID, and I'm going to set that to new date dot get time. So essentially, we're assigning the ID is going to be a timestamp. Okay, this new date represents the date object, and this get time is a method that you can run on this object. All right. Whoop. Okay. Now for the rest of our variables, we're going to have task, and we're going to set the task to whatever the user types in the form, and we can grab it by using the ID of the input, which is task, and then we're just going to say .val, which is going to get the actual value. Whoops. Okay, and we can run a little test here, and we'll say alert task. Alright, so what's going to happen is when the form's submitted, it'll call the function add task, it'll set actually, you know what? I don't even want it to set the ID yet, so I'm going to just comment this out just for this test. And then it should get the value from the task input and then alert it. So let's save that and reload, and let's say some task, submit, and then you can see that it's alerting some task. Okay, so we have that now to work with. Okay, so now we need to do the rest of the values. So we want to say variable task priority is going to be equal to ID priority dot val. All right, and we'll do the same for the date and time. Okay, date, and then we want time. All right, now it's not mandatory. You can do without validation, but we want to have some kind of validation, even if it's just client side. All right, so because we don't want people to be able to enter a task without a title. All right, so we'll say simple validation. Okay, and what we're going to do is we'll say if task is equal to nothing, then we're just going to send an alert. Okay, we'll say task is required. All right, and then I'm going to put down here, I'm going to put an else if. Okay, I'm going to say else if task date is set to nothing. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. Date is required. The time. Whoops. Okay, so the time. Task time is equal to nothing. Then we'll say alert. Time is required. Okay, the priority. Okay, so we're going to say if task priority is equal to nothing, which probably won't happen because it is a select. But if it does, then we're just going to set it to normal. Alright, and then we'll just have another else, and that'll be if all the conditions are met. Alright, so let's try it out. If we save, I don't want to create an ID, so I just want to just comment that out. And if we save and add an entry, okay, just put something, AM, submit. Alright, so it did submit. It didn't get stored yet because we haven't done that functionality, but it let us submit. Now if we just go and submit, it says task is required. Actually, you know what? It should return false because it shouldn't actually go to the next page. So let's say return false. Okay, we'll try again. We'll reload. Try to submit. Task is required. And it still redirects. Alright, so I think I know why that's doing that. When you have an event handler, you have the option to pass in an event. Okay, and we can do that by putting, we'll just use E as the event. And then we're calling add task, so we should also pass in E. Okay, and then the function itself should also take E. All right, and then down here, instead of return false, we're going to say e dot prevent default. All right. Okay, we need some parentheses. All right, so let's go ahead and try that. If we add entry, submit. All right, so now it's not redirecting. Okay, so we just want to do that with all of these. Task parity equals normal. You don't want to do it for the last one, okay, because that's fine. Now comes the more difficult part, and this is where we're going to deal with the local storage API. So we want to first get the items from local storage if there are any, and normally to do that you would use local storage dot get item, and then you'd have tasks. Alright, but we want to be able to use items as objects. Alright, so first of all, let's just set a variable tasks. So what we need to do is wrap this inside JSON dot parse. Okay, so and then what we're going to do is check for and see if there is any tasks. Okay, we're going to just say if tasks is equal to null, then we're just going to set up a new array called tasks, which is just going to be a blank array. Alright, and then we want to get out of that if statement, and we'll say variable task list equals this same thing. Okay, so let me just grab that. Alright, and then we want to build our new object. Okay, so new task object. Okay, so we'll say variable new task, and that is going to be equal to a JSON object. Okay, so we want it wrapped in curly braces, and then we want our fields. So we have an ID, and that's going to be equal to the ID variable, which we created up here, which I should uncomment. Alright, the next one is going to be the task itself, or the task name, I guess. So that's going to be task, which is right here. Alright, next, I'm sorry, not right there. It's right here, task, singular. Next will be the task priority. And we have a variable called tasks priority as well. Alright, and then we have the date. So task date. Date, and then the time. So task time. Alright, so that's our object. Basically everything that's being passed into the form, we're putting that in our object. And then what we want to do is add this object to the task list array. Okay, so to do that we can use the push method. So we'll say tasks dot push, and then pass in the new task object. Okay, and then finally we want to set the item. I'm going to say local storage dot set item. Let's see, set item tasks, and we're going to set that to tasks, which is coming from here. But we need to wrap it inside of JSON dot stringify, okay, which will make it a string. Because remember, local storage can only store strings by default. So this is the workaround. Alright, so let me just look this up real quick, make sure everything looks good. Then we can run a test and see if this actually works. And let's just at the end here, just do a console.log, and we'll say task added. Okay, so let's go back, go to add entry, make sure it's reloaded. We'll add a task here, we'll say pick up kids. This should be no, actually, you know what? I want normal to be the default. So if I reload, you can see that it's low. So that's all we need to do is change the HTML a little bit. We got to find that priority, which is right here, and then the option with normal, we're going to say selected. Whoop. Okay, selected. Now if we reload, normal will be the default. Alright, so pick up kids, we'll keep it at normal, the date, we'll do tomorrow, the time, we'll say 3 o'clock p.m. Okay, submit. Now we didn't do the display tasks functionality yet, so we can't see it here, but there is a way to check. Okay, so if you're using Chrome, you want to hit F12 for Chrome tools, and if we go to the resources tab and go over here to local storage and hit this little arrow, you'll see this file that represents where we are right now. Click on that and it's not here, so it didn't go through for some reason. Let me just take a look here again. So add task, new date. Alright, so I did find one thing here. We're saying if task equals null, but this should be a double equal sign because it's a comparison, not an assignment. Alright, so let's just cross our fingers and hope this works. What's this black here? Alright. What is this? Failed to load resource. Bootstrap CSS map. Let me just check something real quick. Huh. Well, I guess we can just ignore that for now. Okay, so resources, you can see local storage, we don't have anything. So let's go ahead and try to add this. Pick up kids. Let's say 3 o'clock p.m. Submit. And there we go. Alright, so you can see we have a key of tasks, and then the value is, it's an array of JSON objects, but it's put out as a string here because remember, local storage can only store strings. So that's the workaround. When you want to use this info, you need to just parse it back to JSON. Alright, but you can see we have the ID, which is a generated timestamp, so that's going to be unique. Task, which is pick up kids, the task priority is normal, the task date, and we can't see it, but it's also the task time. As you can see here is 1500. Alright, so that's working. In the next video, what we want to do is we want to be able to see these values on our home page. Okay, so we'll do that next.